With Pokemon ZA right around the corner, I thought it is the perfect time to reminisce in some memories and play Pokemon X and Y one last time before the new game releases. But as you can probably guess, playing through games casually is not what we do on this channel. So I was considering a Nuzlocke, but with all the Nuzlocking I've done, playing a vanilla game didn't seem to quite hit the spot for me. A lot of people try doing monotype Nuzlockes of their favorite games, but those seem to be either stupidly hard because of the lack of encounters, or very easy because you can get very good Pokemon very quickly. So I decided to play a Nuzlocke with a different restriction. I wouldn't limit myself on types or on items or on moves to use. I wanted to use only a certain type of design. What design, you might ask? Well, it's frogs. I'm gonna beat a Nuzlocke of Pokemon X while only using Frogos. The game starts and I'm pretty much immediately confronted with my first decision. What starter do I choose? I needed to think about this hard. So we're doing frogs only, yes? And right now, the right one looks like a frog. But what if one of the other two evolves to a frog and the other one and the right one evolves to something that isn't a frog anymore? In that case, we would have picked the wrong Pokemon for the most parts of the game, because we are mostly going to have it in its fully evolved form, just by like how the level curve works. So of course now the question is, which Pokemon do we take here? I mean, like, what if the grass type evolves to a frog, or the Firefox evolves to a frog? Who knows? Could be. Especially like the chestband looks very froggy to me already. Like, imagine this can definitely become frog. But I think I'm gonna go with this one, because like we have to beat the early game first and stuff, you know, we just lost before it even fully evolved. Receive Froakie. After going with Froakie for obvious reasons though, we make our way to the first gym. Since I didn't know how hard this is going to be, and because of the fact that I will have very little Pokemon to work with for most of the game, I decided to go with a level cap of 2 levels above the next gym leader, especially considering that there is no second available frog before the first gym. In return, I'm not allowed to use any items in battle. Conveniently, Froakie learns Water Pulse on level 14, so we have access to a stronger Water Stab for the Viola fight. This one is rather close, but eventually we find a winning strategy by utilizing Quick Attack to not KO the Surskit, making Viola use her precious healing items on this one instead of the ace, the Vivillon. However, some of my runs did wipe to Viola due to bad RNG or a lapse of judgment on my end. And with that, we already arrive at the heart and soul of the region, Lumious City. This city is so big and features so many cool places that Game Freak went ahead and made a whole game located just within the city, or at least for all that we know by now. Once ZA is out, come here and correct me in the comments. Anyways, even though the city is enormous, we actually don't have great access to it yet, and even once we do, most locations just aren't super interesting for the sake of a Nuzlocke. So we just moved to Sycamore's lab pretty quickly, where he wants to battle us using all 3 Kanto starters. Charmander is easy since it's a fire type. Squirtle is pretty bulky, while Froakie is rather frail, which leads to problems, but still beatable. And then there's Bulbasaur. Grass types are very scary at this point, and Bulbasaur has Leech Seed access on level 10, making it even harder to beat. However, since Sycamore isn't a level cap, I can simply level my Froakie until it evolves, making this fight way easier. He did cost me 1 reset due to bad plays and bad RNG though. After beating him, Sycamore wants us to take one of these starters. I don't want my rivals to have a strong grass type, so I take Bulbasaur since he doesn't have a new Froggo for me. Or at least that's what I thought. After picking Bulbasaur, I made my way to the Pokemon Center to put it in the PC, but my chat stopped me. Apparently, both the German PokeWiki and the English Bulbapedia, alongside with Reddit, are of the opinion that the Bulbasaur line resembles a tree toad. I thought it's, you know, a dinosaur, hence the Saur in the name, but I'm not complaining about a strong, bulky Pokemon with more type diversity and an electric resist. So, welcome to the team, CD boy. As it turns out later, this Bulbasaur will be the single most useful Pokemon we will get in this whole challenge. I just didn't realize it yet. At this point, there's nothing too interesting happening in the game. We beat Tierno and his Sword Strats and Corphish before it can hurt anyone, become a Berry Master, grab the Poke Flute alongside Protect for Star Strats and Venoshock for Ivysaur, got rid of Snorlax on the bridge and go through some dialogue at the daycare at the Battle Chateau. Now there's only one more major fight between us and the next encounter for our team. we have to fight Trevor and Tiano while teaming up with our rival, but that just shows again that these two aren't really scary. With the intermezzo out of the way, we can finally access the green grass on Route 7. The Froggo we're looking for can only be found here, not in all the flower patches we had access to earlier on the route. Since I haven't caught any wild Pokemon yet, let me quickly explain the rules. Usually in a Nuzlocke, you can only catch the first Pokemon on each new route. But since I want this run to be interesting from a strategy standpoint rather than being a massive gamble, I am allowing myself to re-encounter until I found a Pokemon that I'm allowed to use. If I kill the first one of these, however, I miss my encounter. Furthermore, optional dupes clause is technically in place, however there's no rule where it could even apply and make sense in this game. On Route 7, for example, there's only one frog Pokemon to get, Croagunk. Having a fighting type is usually pretty useful, but Croagunk isn't super strong, not too fast, and pretty frail as well. It's definitely not useless, but it only really starts to shine once I can evolve it. After successfully catching Croagunk and adding to the team, we make our way to Route 8, which will eventually lead us to Amber Town. From here we have to rescue a scientist from these evil guys called Team Flare, but those are pretty much a pushover. Except for a double battle where we team up with our rival. There's a Scraggy on the opposing side that has the Moxie ability, which boosts its attack stat every time it can claim a kill, and our rival does a great job at feeding this thing. We didn't lose a run here, but it was very scary occasionally. After traversing some sandy areas, we make it to one of two major run killers, the second gym. You see, because this game isn't that well designed, the second gym has a level cap of 25, or in our case 27, which is pretty much double the one of the first gym, but still not enough to involve any of our Pokemon. The Tyrant of Grant is very strong on the attacking side, and because of the Thunder Wave from Memora, you can't simply lead with Croagunk and Sweep. Or can you? I figured out that if you have a decent enough attack stat on Croagunk, you can one-shot the Memora with Rock Smash before it can Thunder Wave you, then use that Rock Smash for chip damage on Tyrant, to finally switch into Ivysaur and revenge it without needing to rely on Sleep Powder hits. I have to admit that the Citrus Berry you can steal from the Snorlax and the Black Sludge you can farm on Wild Croagunk helps a lot. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention it, but since we got Thief, we have access to a lot of held items of wild Pokemon, like the mentioned Berry and Black Sludge, as well as Light Balls from Pikachu to Flick. Once we manage to beat Grant, we can make our way to Geosenge Town, where Corinna awaits us. And while the gym fight against her will fill a decent amount of the script, the fight in Geosenge Town is pretty easy since we can overlevel her a decent amount and her Lucarios need too much setup before they're able to do actual damage. On our way through Mirror Cave, we have to dodge one of the fighting ladies because she has a Holochar, which we don't have a lot against. And after beating one kinda scary double battle featuring Vesperquin, we arrive in Shaller City. Shaller City provides us with another rival battle, which we lost to once, and then with a gym fight, which, as the strongest Pokemon features, you guessed it, Holochar. Believe me, I tried a lot to beat this wrestling bird. I tried to come up with a fling strat using the aforementioned light balls to paralyze it and therefore make it less of a threat, but to get a fling off with Frogadier, I need to either switch it into an attack or use it to beat the Machoke before, which also leads to too much chip damage. And even if I would be able to do it, this Holochar has the Limber ability, rendering it completely immune to paralysis. Then I tried to figure out a strat which Leech Seed, Eviolite Ivysaur, but then the Power Punch and Swords Dance create an issue. I even considered the Cobra Berry, which halves the damage of a single super effective flying type move, but Flying Press, although it is considered both a flying and fighting type move, does not activate the berry because of the way it's coded. I didn't see any way to get through this thing consistently and lost a handful of runs here. Until I realized that with a level cap of +2, I can have a Venusaur. Not only that, I could have it even with a normal level cap. I just completely blanked that Venusaur doesn't evolve on 36 but 32, and because of XP management reasons I'm gonna explain in a second, I never leveled my Ivysaur fully. Venusaur has essentially the bulk of Ivysaur with Eviolite, but can also have Black Sludge and does way more raw damage, so with Venu this was kinda easy. After beating Corinna in her gym, she invites us to the top of the tower where we finally get access to the Mega Bracelet and with it to our now Mega Venusaur. We did have to leave the Lucario behind though, since it's not a Froggo. At this point, another issue occurs that I just mentioned, XP management. I needed my team to be on basically maximum level for the fighting gym, but the next two gyms are only 2 and 3 levels above the last one. And there's a handful of mandatory trainers between the 3rd and 4th, but especially a lot between the 4th and 5th because of the Team Flare Gauntlet in the power plant. And I have only 3 Pokemon instead of 6 to split this XP to. Just to get some major roadblocks out of the way, the rival battle before the gym is easy with Mega Venusaur. Inside the gym I beat most trainers with Croagunk, so Venu doesn't eat too much XP, although that did lead me to losing Croagunk to an Executor once, which then lead to everything over-leveling and me having to end the run. And the gym leader is very doable with Mega Venusaur. The Flare Gauntlet is mostly Greninja only, but since I lost my Greninja and a run once here to a Confusion, Self-Hit plus Acrobatics from Golbat, I did have to play this really carefully with anti-confusion berries on my Greninja. At the very end of the gauntlet, my Greninja was so close to the level cap that I actually had to calculate the XP I would get from the admin fight to know if I can do it with only Greninja or would need to switch out to split the XP, because I needed my starter for the upcoming Houndoom as well. After clutching this whole section pretty nicely, I made my way to the 5th gym, the last fight gatekeeping me from being freed by this experience hell, and also another fight that would be impossible without Venusaur. After losing my second to last run once on this fight because my Venusaur had Sleep Powder, which doesn't help with electric terrain, I realized my mistake. I could have gotten the TM for Bulldoze, a ground type move Mega Venusaur can learn. With this newfound strength, Venusaur is now able to leverage its defensive capabilities while also doing enough damage to claim the kills on all the electric types on the gym leader's team. After finally beating Clement, there's one more rival battle on Route 14, but since my level cap is the one of the next gym, I don't have to worry about levels here, and after beating our rival in the same fashion we did the last couple of times, I can finally get another Pokemon. Poliwag. You see, Poliwag and its evolution line is the last line I have access to in this challenge, but I have access to a lot of them. You might wonder, but Phoenix, didn't you say Dupe's Claws is in place? Yeah, I did, but I said optional Dupe's Claws. So I can get all the Poliwags I want as long as I get each one on a new route, and then evolve them into Poliwrath for offense, Politoed for defense, or even just Poliwhirl with an Eviolite for a better physical but worse special defense compared to Politoed. And the best part about these is, I can lose some. Losing 1 or 2, maybe even 3 Poliwag evolutions won't cost me the run because I can replace them with the others that might have a little worse stats but do the job all the same. I have finally, after running this for so long, access to Pokemon I can actually sacrifice without losing the run. After catching some Poliwags, checking their stats to assign them optimal roles, and making our way through the swamp, we then faced off against the Fairy type leader. This one was weird since we do have lots of fighting and dark types, but also 2 poison types, but one of them was Toxicroak, who's still a fighting type. After checking some calcs, we quickly figured out that our Toxicroak can beat Mawile by just using Dig even if it spams Iron Defense, but sadly it lacked the power to deal then with Mr. Mime. Since we know Mr. Mime will use a 4 times effective Psychic on our Toxicroak, we can switch into our Dark type Greninja, which is immune to Psychic but weak to Dazzling Gleam. However, by now switching into Politoed, we have simply taken less damage compared to switching to Politoed directly. And we did not risk the 10% chance to have our special defense lowered by Psychic. Politoed can now proceed to use on the Mr. Mime, dealing increasing damage every turn, and then stall out the Toxic timer by using a combination of Protect and Substitute. This now only leaves her Sylveon, which was simple enough again since Mega Venusaur tanks everything super well and does a lot with Stab Venoshock. With the 6th badge in our hands, let's quickly go rescue the Pokeball Factory by beating up Team Flare yet again and grabbing both a Big Nugget and, more importantly, a Master Ball. The game then led us to Nimbletown, spend a minute talking to this redhead guy that's definitely still not evil, grabbed some more Pokemon, and I educated my chat about the depths of the internet. Leave a sub if you know why I'm laughing about this. There was this one post about that witch. You sell some Moorwilks to one kid once, and then you receive these kinds of DMs. And then there was a screenshot of DMs from Tierno. Like, he essentially DM'd, I need milk now, mommy. Give me milk, mommy. I need your milk, mommy. For another detour this game makes you do, we had to traverse the Frost Cavern, definitely dodging every single trainer you can dodge and not running into one every second, and then told Team Flare to hack off again. God, this is getting stale. Can we get to the part where we thwart their plans already? On a brighter note, we now unlock the Move Relearner. This means we can finally optimize movesets for single fights instead of considering choices to be relevant for the future. And believe me, with some of the fights coming up, we really needed that. In the next city, our rival awaits us before he can try to get the 7th gym badge, but his team didn't really change since last time, and we got even more tools with the polys now, so this was rather simple. The gym itself was confusing as ever, but we managed to get through unscathed as well due to Greninja being a strong and fast dark type. Having 2 extra levels start to feel a bit too powerful at this point, so I'm considering dropping that rule for the late game and just go to the normal level cap. Which, of course, is perfectly valid, since even if I'm allowed to go 2 levels above, I don't really have to. Now equipped with every badge but the last, Lysander finally decides it's time to destroy the world, and therefore time for us to stop him. Our first stop on the mission is the secret laboratory in Lumia City, where we also have our first fight against Lysander right at the start. While his team isn't that threatening at this point, it really quickly shows the threats we will have to face in a bit. What follows is the favorite part of every streamer, YouTuber, and probably player of Pokemon games. The endless long gauntlets of grunts that all share a pool of 4 Pokemon, have no more than 2 and are like 10 levels below what you should be. This game at least fixes it up with some of the scientists in between, but none of these are really issues because of their small team size either. After making it to the bottom, we get some lore, are presented with the world-saving choice that isn't a choice to begin with, this is still Pokemon after all, and beat up the last scientist in Sarasic with a toxic stall of his contrary superpower Malamar. After Sarasic presented us with what we in the business call Magician's Choice, he activates the weapon and we have to trek over to the City of Stones and disable it again. In here, the second Lysander fight awaits us, much scarier than the last one. It starts off bad enough with us missing our Toxic, taking more than anticipated from the high jump kick, then protecting to hopefully do 50% on the next HJK, but the AI predicts us and goes for acrobatics. This means we now have to risk the crit to get a Toxic, but on the Toxic it sets up the sword stance. Luckily, Substitute lets us stall out the Mienshao, just to invite in the Gyarados, which I was hoping to see last. Mega Venusaur managed to handle Gyarados without major issues luckily, by using Leech Seed, Toxic, Protect and the Confusion from Outrage to chip it down and keep ourselves healthy. Pyro then easily gets handled by Politoad's immense special defense, and Honchkrow also doesn't provide that big of an issue due to its rather low speed. After obliterating all the admins, since they only have 1 Pokemon and I can prep in between the fights, we're up against the cover legendary Xerneas. In this game, after fighting the legendary, you immediately have to face off against Lysander again, so I didn't want to bother with defeating such a strong fairy type. So I just caught it with the Master Ball and sent it to the box. It's not a frog, so I can't use it after all. The upcoming third Lysander fight was one of the hardest this whole challenge. We started off a little better with a Toxic on the Mienshao, which immediately used Sword Stance. That, however, gave us the chance to protect against its incoming high jump kick, dooming it for 50% plus a total of 18% from the Toxic so far. I then decide to play into the crit to get some chip damage and promptly miss my Hydro Pump, but Toxic damage plus another Protect gets the job done anyways. The Pyroar gets dealt with the same manner as last time since it didn't change its set, but the Honchkrow suddenly became pretty scary since we need some of our team for Gyarados and Flying is the best type against the whole team. After doing some damage cult, I recognize that our Greninja can deal with it pretty well though. Finally, that leaves us with not just a Gyarados, but a Mega Gyarados. For this one, I had a specific plan. I wanted to use my Poliwrath to tank 2 Outrages. However, damage rolls made it difficult. You see, whenever a Pokemon attacks, the game rolls a random number between 85 and 100 and multiplies the damage with that number as a percentage. Therefore, sometimes an attack does more damage than it did the turn before, even without stat changes. How does this work into the Gyarados' Outrage? Well, if it low rolls, we tank the 2 hits, but if it high rolls, there is a chance we feint to a second high roll. To prevent this, I equip Poliwrath with an Oran Berry, and even just the 10 HP healing, not 10%, 10 HP, are enough to push us out of the range of the second outrage. Therefore, we could get off one Focus Blast on it, provided we hit, which is enough to then facilitate its defeat with the rest of the party without having to lose a Pokemon. So far the plan. Gyarados comes out as the last Pokemon. We switch into Poliwrath. The Gyarados did use Outrage. We get into the yellow and eat a Oran Berry. But wait, we're still in kill range. Why? I did the calcs. There's no way this should be able to kill me. I should always have enough HP to live a hit, but I don't. I'm missing 2 HP to live what I thought to be the highest damage possible, but for that to happen, it had to take more than 88 HP of damage, so I'm probably dead to even more rolls now. How is this possible? Well, as it turns out, I had one big misconception, which I only learned the truth about months after this run was completed when talking to a friend about it. I thought in Gen 6 every trainer has 0 IVs on their Pokemon. IVs change the stats of Pokemon ever so slightly, making even Pokemon of the same species unique. You might remember mentioning having a decent attack stat on Croagunk earlier. Having 31 IVs is the maximum per stat, having 0 is naturally the lowest it can be. As it turns out, gym leaders and some special trainers, including Lysander, have IVs on their Pokemon. And not just a few. Lysander specifically has 20 IVs on each of his Pokemon. This shifts the possible damage my Poliwrath can take from We Always Live to a percentage depending on the damage roll. But since I don't know the exact amount of the IVs in the moment of playing, I cannot deduct how high that roll is. So I decide to follow along with the plan. Poliwrath should still be faster, hopefully get the damage I need in, and if it does drop to 0, we will have lost a Pokemon, but one we can probably replace, as I mentioned earlier. So I pressed Focus Blast and prayed. Poliwrath did indeed outspeed, and we even managed to hit the Focus Blast, getting us much needed chip damage. And we lived the outrage! However, since the Gyarados did more damage than I thought and didn't get the 2-turn confusion, I cannot safely switch out, so I decided to rest Poliwrath's fate on a second Focus Blast. And miss. The first death of the run. Like I said, one we can live with since we got a bunch of other Poliwag encounters, but still a sad one. It was one of the better ones regarding stats after all. A Greninja came in, went for the Grass Knot that never had a chance of not killing, and we defeated Lysander. Thank you, Angie. Your life depended on a 30% chance, which we didn't hit, but you will always be remembered as the first needed sacrifice of the Nuzlocke. After mourning our loss, grabbing the next Poliwag from the team and releasing the deer into the wild, we then made our way past the 7th City Gym and into Terminus Cave to pick up the TM for Brick Break, sadly the best fighting step our physical Poliwrath will be able to learn in this game without breeding. After our visit in Terminus Cave, Professor Sycamore awaits us in Curryway Town. He called us earlier and said he wanted to talk, but suddenly he assaults us with a battle where he uses the 3 evolved Kanto starters. Wait, didn't we take his Bulbasaur? How does he... Anyways, since our team has significantly more options than after Gym 1 now, Sycamore's "I'm not that strong" line from earlier finally holds true. Defeating Sycamore enables us to get 2 new Poliwags in both this town and on the next route, before having to prepare for a gauntlet of rival battles on the bridge. Those of you that have played this game probably remember this section fondly, since you have to defeat Shauna, Tiano and Trevor all in a row, although you do get healed after the second fight, so we have to make sure our lead Pokemon is chosen carefully to deal with whatever these 3 throw at us. Shauna starts off with their Caddy, which cannot break the substitute of a Poliwhirl after we burned it with a Scald, leading us to a position where I can Toxic her Gudra while still being behind my substitute. And now the Poison Gudra can simply be stalled by once again alternating between Protect and Sub. Her last Pokemon, Delphox, then cannot break through our Politoed, even with its Calm Mind setup, although I did accidentally risk a crit on the last Psychic, and dies to a few Scald hits. This does mean we have to face off against Tiano with our now chipped down Poliwhirl in the lead, but luckily our Greninja is still full HP and therefore can simply switch in on the Talonflame and use a Surf to take it out. Having Greninja out now brings in Roserade from the opponent, but this is another case of Mega Venusaur being crazy strong defensive Pokemon. In fact, so defensive and strong that it also beats the Crawdon right after. At this point we get 1 full heal for our team before facing off against Trevor and his lead, Raichu. If you recall, we still lead with a Poliwhirl, so this isn't optimal. However, his team constellation allows for a quick switch into Venusaur to defeat the Raichu, a switch back into Poliwhirl on the Aerodactyl, and finally another switch to Venu to beat the Florges. And with the Florges going down, we have finished the Rival Bridge Gauntlet and can proceed to the last section of the game. With entering the last city of the game, I feel comfortable with doing some final adjustments to movesets, barring the last few TMs we can collect after getting all the badges and entering Victory Road, so we equip all of our Pokemon with their best moves from the Move Learner as well as the TMs we collected so far. And then made our way to the Pokemon Village to tell Wulfric to go back to his gym and hecking do his job. While we're here, we collected another Poliwag for the road though, can't have enough of those. Going through the Ice Gym was rather simple. Toxicroak and Poliwrath dealt with basically any Pokemon the trainers threw at us, except for the few Piloswines and Mamoswines which simply got defeated by Greninja's Surf. Wulfric himself went similarly. Toxicroak Sludge Bomb just OHKO'd the Abomasnow. We then had to play around the confusion a little bit to finally get Poliwrath the Brick Break on Cragganol, and for the Avalok we simply had to connect the Focus Blast of our now special Toxicroak, which we did, and with Wulfric's defeat we can also claim our 8th badge. There's not a lot left to do now, except make our way to the Elite Four through Victory Road and finish this whole thing. But for that, we of course had to get our last 2 Poliwags on the route leading to Victory Road and Victory Road itself. In between those encounters, we also had to defeat the guy guarding the entrance to Victory Road, but he was a pushover to be honest. While traversing Victory Road and defeating its trainers, where none of them were a great challenge for themselves, we eventually run into Calem one last time for a final rival battle. This one went basically as you would expect it from the rest of our rival battles though. The Meowstic was quickly dealt with by Greninja, Chestnut didn't have a chance against a Poison-type Toxicroak, Absol gets demolished by our Fighting types, and did you know that in terms of being weak to the Grass-type Venusaur, Vaporeon is the most competent Pokemon on his team? After he says goodbye with some Max Revives I'm not allowed to use, all we need to do is defeat the rest of the trainers in the second half of Victory Road. Without preparation, the gauntlet at the end could be a bit scary for some, but since we can heal up in between, none of those have more than 3 Pokemon, and we have good options for basically anything the game can throw at us now, these weren't too scary. All we had to do was utilize a Toxic Stall here and there and otherwise play to our type advantages. Now we have finally arrived at the last big obstacle of the game, the Elite Four. In this game you can choose in which order you defeat the Elite Four, which is really useful of course, but we still need to be very cautious since losing a Pokemon to one of these means we won't have it for the rest of the fights, and in general Elite Four fashion we can't switch our team out in between of course. On top of that, we need to make sure our movesets work on every trainer since the only new moves we can learn while chatting them are through TMs. After an hour of doing damage calcs, picking up some final items and TMs, and evolving our last few Poliwags, since the ones we won't use will just stay on the box anyway, so there's no reason to keep them unevolved as options now, we start the Elite Four battles off with Malva, the Fire Elite Four and the final Team Flare member we have to defeat. Kinda weird how the game glances over her being both the news reporter of the region and a Team Flare member. Anyway, she finally shows us where the team name comes from with her fire types, which as you can guess aren't a big problem for a fast and strong attacking Greninja. In fact, she went down in 4 serves without any risk of even taking damage. Who could have thought that frog Pokemon are good against fire types? With the free win out of the way, we then immediately make our way to Sibo, the Water Elite Four, and kind of a reason for some childhood trauma, I think? I remember losing to this Dragon Dancing Gyarados so many times and getting very angry back then. Hopefully history round repeats itself in this fight. The Clobbitzer is easily beaten by a Mega Venusaur due to its grass typing. The incoming Starmie then gets outplayed by a switch to Greninja on the Psychic, followed by a Dark Pulse one-hit KO, and the Barbarical that wants to now cross-chop Greninja didn't expect the U-turn back into Venusaur, which simply kills it with a 4 times effective Petal Blizzard. All this now leaves us with is the aforementioned Dragon Dancing Gyarados. However, I still got a surprise tool that will help us that will help us right now. Back when we got Bulbasaur at the very beginning of the run, I recognized something very important when checking its IVs. The IVs turned out exactly to make its hidden power type electric. So even though Gyarados' high special defense makes it so we need to hit it twice, It can never defeat Mega Venusaur with 2 attacks or with 1 Dragon Dance into 1 attack, so we can clean this fight up and are now done with half of the Elite Four. We are, however, not done with surprise tools with our Venusaur. In preparation for the Steel Elite Four member Wigstrom, we taught Venusaur Earthquake, which we got as a TM earlier and which is a straight upgrade from the Bulldoze we used in Clement. With Earthquake, we are now able to 2-hit KO the Klefki, which does use the opportunity to get up 2 layers of spikes, so we need to be cautious when switching our Pokemon. We do not need to switch yet though, since the incoming Promo Pass also gets simply OHKO'd by an Earthquake after breaking it sturdy with some Leech Seeds and recovering some HP in the process. However, Venusaur doesn't have a lot it can do to Scissor, since its typing allows it to only have 1 weakness, being a 4 times weakness to fire of course. As you can tell by our team, we aren't exactly equipped with fire types, and even though X-Scissor is only neutral on our Pokemon, the high attack stat of Scissor still makes it scary. But during my preparations outside of the Elite Four, I specifically chose one of my 2 Politoads I brought over the others because it turns out to have hidden power fire. So by switching it on the X-Scissor, which never kills me even with a crit after the spikes damage, we can simply outspeed the Scissor and OHKO it with the 4 times effective hidden power. This leaves his signature, Aegislash. You see, Aegislash is a special Pokemon that switches between its very defensive shield form and its very frail but hard-hitting sword form. To switch back to its shield form, it has to use King's Shield, which works like Protect that also drops your attack by 2 stages if you use a contact move into it. However, there's one crucial difference. It does not protect against status moves. This means after a quick switch to Venusaur, we can set up Leech Seed again. Additionally, the AI does not like it to have such low defenses in its sword form, so it's basically guaranteed to King's Shield every other turn. Meaning we can use our own Protect to stall it out on the attacking turns and simply wait out until Leech Seed drains all of its life force. That's the Elite Four member down. All that is left now are Dresner, the Dragon-type Elite Four, and the champion of course. Dresner herself wasn't too big of a problem either. Her Elite Dragalge gets simply defeated by another Earthquake from the Venusaur, and Greninja can easily switch in on any attack of Noivern and then chain kill both it and the Altaria with an Ice Beam. Finally, since the Druddigon does not feint to 1 Ice Beam and can 1-hit KO my Greninja with its fighting move, Revenge, I need to switch out to one of our Politoads, which takes the Revenge much better due to not being weak to fighting, and swiftly beats Druddigon with 2 Ice Beams. And this is it. After losing a handful of runs to the early and mid game, the first one to make it past Gym 5 also made it all the way to the champion. Diantha and her full team of 6 Pokemon, including massive threats like Hawlucha, Goodra and Mega Gardevoir, awaits us. And the first of those is also the first we face in the fight. However, we have learned from our experience with the beast before. We know that Venusaur can defeat it, and in this specific case we do that with the most annoying, you will get called slurs on ladder stalling set you can think of. Leech Seeds, Toxic, Substitute, and Protect. Hawlucha needs to set up a sword stance before it does any meaningful damage to us, so we have enough time to set up all of our stall tools. However, this is only step 1 of my master plan to beat this Hawlucha. You see, trainers in this game use healing items. In the case of the Elite Four, full restores. These heal not only all the HP of the Pokemon, but also its status, like the toxic poison we inflicted with. However, this wasn't an issue, since I simply defeated the Pokemon before it got into a healing range, but as you can tell from my moveset, that's not possible here, we don't have any attacking moves. But that's exactly what I planned for. On the turn, Diantha uses a full restore to heal Hawlucha. I swap my Mega Venusaur for my Greninja, which now wasn't at the risk of taking damage, and at the end of the turn, Leech Seed triggered, since they don't get healed by full restore, 1/8 of its max HP as damage to the Hawlucha, which is exactly the damage I need to now outspeed and defeat it with an Ice Beam. Greninja being faster and stronger than anything on her team now leads to Diantha bringing in her Goodra, one of the only Pokemon able to live an attack by Greninja. Beating Goodra went similar to Shauna's. We brought in a Politoad, missed the Toxic, hit the second one, risking crit, which would have been okay since we don't need Politoad anymore for the rest of the fight, and then bring in a Venusaur again to use a Star Set against the Goodra. Venusaur couldn't use a Leech Seed to get some recovery against this, due to the ability of Goodra, Sap Zipper, but we still managed to stall it out without bigger issues since it can't break a Substitute with 1 hit. Her next Pokemon was one of her 2 fossils, Auroras. At this point, Poliwrath finally also got to participate in this Elite Four, switching in on the Auroras, setting on the Reflect, and then promptly killing the Auroras and breaking the Reflect again with Brick Break. On the incoming Pumpkin, we now went to Toxicroak, because how am I supposed to beat this game without it, and defeated it with a rather lucky Sludge Bomb Poison on its Phantom Force. But even if it wouldn't have poison, we were always safe against this with some switching around. The Tyrantrum also simply died by Poliwrath's hand, and that leaves her ace, the Mega Gardevoir. To make sure our secret answer for this beast switches in on the weakest move, we switched Poliwrath out and went into Venusaur once to tank the Moonblast and always bait Psychic. Venusaur may have died to a Psychic here, but since it is the last Pokemon, I was fine with that. After successfully taking Moonblast and confirming Psychic to come now, we can now switch into our second Politoed, the one that didn't get shipped using Toxic and Gudra, and use one last surprise tool I didn't tell you about yet. Perish Song. Perish Song takes out both Pokemon that listen to it in 3 turns unless they are switched out. And guess what? While we can save a Politoed and then simply start the Gardevoir's turns, she can't switch out again because it is her last Pokemon. Even if I were to sacrifice 1 Pokemon per round to it, I would still always win the run now since I have more than 3 Pokemon remaining. So all we had to do now is protect once, switch into Toxicroak on the Thunderbolt, and then Greninja on the Psychic, watching Gardevoir perish to Politoed's Song and beating Pokemon X, but only Frog Pokemon, without even losing a Pokemon to the Elite Four, and with 1 lost Pokemon total. Thank you so much for watching. We also demolished a Z in the epilogue, but that fight doesn't really count for Nuzlocke anyway.